As a kid, I loved Kung Fu movies, so I went to Chinatown, trained with a wise teacher, and became a Kung Fu master. Sounds simple, right? Not really. My journey, like the study of Kung Fu, was as arduous as it was rewarding, filled with as many secrets as revelations and as much heartache as triumph. It's a defining moment in my life, and while I began studying Kung Fu to learn how to fight, what I discovered was a way to live. Martial arts never came easy to me. I was far from talented, and even farther from being the chosen one. It was only through years of tenacious perseverance that I was able to make steady progress. And so, I was surprised when my master told me that I should teach Kung Fu and share the art outside of Chinatown. I did just that and taught Kung Fu to my own students for 20 years. I always wanted to do more to share the art of Kung Fu with others, but was limited by only being able to teach those within my immediate area. What about the rest of the world? Then one day, I had one of the deepest insights about Kung Fu. I realized that the punches, kicks, throws, and myriad of martial maneuvers are merely the delivery system for the true essence of Kung Fu, the philosophy and way of life. Having worked for years as a professional artist and storyteller in film, animation, video games, and comic books, I realized that I could draw upon this unique skill set to share my passion for Kung Fu with the greater world. And so I created Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. The first issue is created entirely by myself, from story and art to colors and lettering. Every panel is filled with unprecedented accuracy in its depiction of Kung Fu by a comic book creator who knows from first-hand experience what it means to be a Kung Fu master. Shadow Ghost is a martial arts coming-of-age story about a young man whose search for the truth about a legendary hero leads him to study Kung Fu, and through a twist of fate becomes part of the legend himself. For the first time in comic book history, you can immerse yourself further in each issue with Kung Fu skills technology, powered by Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Scan the QR code at the back of the comic and follow an exclusive link to an online instructional video where I teach you Kung Fu techniques featured in this series. With Kung Fu skills technology, you can do more than just read about the Shadow Ghost saga. You can become a part of it. The first issue is completely finished and ready for print. All that's needed is for you to make a pledge of support so that we can fund the printing of the first issue. Together, we can share the wisdom of Kung Fu with the greater world. Shadow Ghost is the story of Kung Fu. It's about the people, the art, the culture, and the philosophy. It's my story and the story of those that I've learned from, taught, fought, and loved. Join me and become part of the vibrant legacy in a place and time where we might not be the chosen one, but where we can make a choice to be part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves. I'm Sifu Curtis Fujita, and this is Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.
Hi, I'm Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator, and the art director for Kung Fu magazine for more than 20 years. But I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really special to me. It's the middle grade graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale. Imagine the story of tigers and dragons and martial artists and monsters. So when I launched the campaign for A Tiger's Tale Volume 1, I did not know what to expect. But it succeeded thanks to a group of passionate backers. It was also awarded the Make More Comics art grant that year and was later featured as part of an art gallery exhibit. And that's why I'm coming to Kickstarter, to cover production fees, printing, copy editing, things like that. Books completed, with the exception of a few pages I've set aside for color over the course of the campaign. This turned out to be a popular feature of Volume 1's campaign, so I thought I'd bring it back for Volume 2. I think it's going to be great fun for everyone. Hope you'll support the campaign. I'm very excited about it. Thanks for stopping by.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Comics Foo Show,
where we stand at the crossroads between comics, kung fu, and pop culture of all sorts.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm Curtis Fujita, and this is Patrick Lugo. Just to introduce myself, I'm a kung fu instructor, comic book creator. My current comic book campaign on Kickstarter is Shadow Ghost #1. It's the kung fu comic by a kung fu master. And Patrick, why don't you tell the folks about yourself?
I'm Patrick Lugo. You can find me online as Plugo. I'm an author, illustrator, and comic creator. My most recent graphic novel is Volume 2 of A Tiger's Tale, available on Kickstarter alongside Volume 1. The campaign is just days away of completing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So we got some exciting stuff going on in this show. We kind of talked about it briefly at the end of the last show last night, but we have an extremely special guest. I mean, I would say probably one of our most highest level kung fu in terms of artistry guests that we've had on, especially this season, and that would be none other than the amazing comic book artist, concept artist, Geof Darrow.
Geof Darrow. I mean, you will recognize his visionary artistry in such movies as The Matrix, its many sequels, and something like maybe a movie called Speed Racer you might recognize. Mm-hmm. And that's just naming a couple.
Definitely. And his comic book work is just absolutely stunning. I mean, singular work, I would say. Hard-boiled, as well as, recently Shaolin Cowboy, which totally ties into what we do here, comic books and kung fu. But just a phenomenal artist, really great guy. And, spoiler, we recorded this in the wee hours of the evening because he's actually in Europe right now. He's in France. So we had to adjust the timeline. So this is a recorded session, but stick around. You are going to be blown away. He has some phenomenal stories. And, I think we should just get to it, Patrick. I think there's really only so much more we can say without just getting to it and letting everybody have.
I totally agree. We stayed up extra late so that we could have that conversation with Geof. So you folks should watch all the amazing little insights he had to offer. Man, they were good.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. So without further ado, Geof Darrow. Patrick, maybe you should make the introductions because you're most familiar with Geof.
Certainly. I've been very excited by the opportunity to reconnect with you, Geof, after our illuminating conversation the last time we spoke. And I've been particularly wanting to close that loop by inviting my good friend, Sifu Curtis Fujita, into the conversation so we can get some questions that I know you and I had regarding, some Kung Fu lore and just really kind of create a whole context for what you do with Shaolin Cowboy and how that pertains to how people look at Kung Fu these days. Like when I'm working for Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine and I'm reading many forum posts where people talk about how they started their martial arts journey, reading those 1970s issues of Master of Kung Fu or the black and white Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And I remember that you probably have crystal clear images of those. But, I was talking with Gene Ching, the publisher of Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine, and we were talking about how, like, these days, what are young martial artists looking at and being influenced by? And one of the key things that comes out is The Matrix, right? When The Matrix hit in 1999, how that really kind of gave people like a Western perspective of that genre, right? Of the kung fu genre. But then now in comics, Shaolin Cowboy kind of sits at the top of the comics hill.
I don't know about that.
I think so, because and being in publishing, we keep seeing like how kung fu heroes keep coming back to comics, right? Like, and most recently it's Shang-Chi, and there's a bunch of others, right? Our mutual friend Jerry Ma had his Monkey King comic come out, but then DC Comics also did the Monkey Prince.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my whole thinking about
Dark
it.
Horse had another book that came out that I thought was really good called Orphan and the Five Demons. That's very nice.
Yes, that was James Stucco,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah, very nice, beautifully drawn.
That had a very
very wuxia.
Five Deadly Venoms vibe, because it was like the several. It's the Orphan, and then the 5 beat. Each one's like a different kung fu style. Yeah, I'm still on the hunt for the Choi Hark variant cover. It's kind of a challenge to find, but it's fun to be on the lookout for that cover.
Yeah, I have someone that can send you one.
Well, I won't even ask. It's the pursuit is what's fun. But I was looking at some of one of the more recent issues, and I was admiring how how you're designing the characters, like not just Shaolin Cowboy. We kind of know, and I think Curtis has some theories as to what how you've come across the design of Shaolin Cowboy. Well, and I don't want to spoil that for him. So maybe I should let him ask you that, or let him propose that theory to you before I ask my question.
Well, Patrick and I always talk about these kind of things, and I was wondering if Zatoichi, the blind swordsman, had some influence there.
Totally. Yeah. It's one of my favorite characters. Those films were just so. They did so many of them. They had 2 or 3 of them a year, and they're so beautifully directed with such little time, and he's just such a wonderful character, because he's can be very modest and he's extremely vain, and and both things kind of get him into trouble. And I just always love the idea of, and I see that in kung fu, that people underestimate someone that doesn't look like. If you don't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, then nobody will take you seriously. And in those films, anybody can be somebody that you really shouldn't mess around with. You shouldn't underestimate people. I love the message of that.
Well, definitely. I was just talking to somebody the other day about it, and it's like that wholesome kind of vulnerable nature. If you have the martial arts ability, you can hold on to that. If you don't have that in your back pocket, you have to kind of put on the airs that you're somebody more aggressive. And so, being accomplished in your field and in art, is that something that for you had to navigate? I mean, I think there's a big difference between being an artist and being a professional artist. And you seem to be somebody that's able to do both really well. Was that a tough thing to, navigate, or is it something that came natural for you, or do you feel that there's any difference between the two?
I've always had a hard time. To this day, I really don't think I'm that accomplished. I think I'm lucky. I mean, I worked very hard at it, but I took such a strange route to get to where I am. In terms of, because I grew up reading comics as a kid, and I wanted to do the superhero stuff. And it was when I discovered martial arts films that I thought it's nice, and European comics as well as Japanese comics, that there was something other than just guys with capes and masks and stuff, and just doing, once again, taking somebody who looks kind of ordinary but who is extraordinary in his or her own way. And it's not always easy, because the comics public kind of wants a certain kind of a thing, and it's kind of the same thing. But I think the comic is kind of find its own little niche, and I mean, enough people buy it where I'm able to keep doing it. Although people always ask me, I always get this asked question, when are you going to do something? When are you going to do like Batman or Superman? And so many people have done it. I don't care anymore. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's no need to. I mean, it's been done, and do you feel that you know, there's a difference artistically between like bande dessinée and American books and manga, or is it more the subject matter, or is it just the whole outlook
well,
altogether?
I think it's the execution as well. I
Mhm.
mean, in some ways, American comics are the way they are because they have to do them, on a monthly basis. In France, which is where I actually started, somebody will do like one book a year or a book and a half. This artist Mobius, Jean Giraud, who is very well known and a genius, uh, he um, he could do two, which was a lot, sometimes three. I mean, he was in some ways as brilliant an artist as he was almost like a Jack Kirby uh, of French comics because he could produce so much. But he just always that guy was always drawing. Just I'd go to he'd be at a party and eventually you'd see him over in a corner and drawing on a sheet of paper. And then in Japan, once again, it's they have to do so much material so fast, and yet it's just of such a high quality. I know they have assistants and such, but still, and it's a different way of storytelling. All three have a different way uh, of illustrating their stories. I mean, Americans are very fast and very dynamic. The French have a little bit more. The French, Belgian, European. It's a little more laid back. You have a little bit more of a lot of people sitting around and talking about things before they do anything. Whereas the Americans, they just jump right into it. They just start beating on each other right away. And then in Japan, you kind of have a mix of the two. Except I always found Japanese comics to be the most cinematic of all of them, because looking at manga, some of them are just like watching a Shambara and Jetageke. And, I mean, I really like familiar with Hideo Gosha. I mean, he actually, wrote a comic book that they turned into a TV show with Wakayama Tebisaburo. The Mute Samurai, it was as a comic book for first
Oh,
that he wrote.
oh, wow.
But they look like movies to me. And I've read a lot of Japanese comics because you can read Japanese comics in my mind without actually having to read the dialogue. Because I would buy them in Japanese. I couldn't read Japanese, but
Yeah.
I could basically tell what the story was. And when they did translate them, it was pretty close to what I thought because their storytelling is so fantastic and so dead on.
That's
So I
so
think there is a difference. And I've always myself have been caught kind of. I always feel like I'm in a plane over the Atlantic, somewhere between and the Pacific, somewhere between America, Japan, and Europe. So,
that sounds like the story of my life. I'm Japanese, Irish, English, so that's every moment for me. Um, you kind of referenced Moebius.
yeah,
What was, because I've read a little bit about, the relationship between you two, but what was that like? Because if I understand it correctly, didn't you kind of start from the fan standpoint or from it, from that, and then went into the collaborative aspect with him, or what was that like?
yeah. I was just a huge fan of his because I discovered his comics in the '70s. I was in high school in a book called it was Maurice Horn's History of the Comic Strip in the World. They had a few panels from his books in there, and there was a bookseller in California called Bud Plant. He's still
Oh,
around,
great.
and he had European comics. They were like $3 for one, and I ordered one of Mobius's. His name was Jean Giraud. It's Lieutenant Blueberry, a Western. I like Westerns as well, and I was just amazed by it. And so I was just such a huge fan, and I'd show that stuff to other people, like other guys, other comic aficionados, and they go, "Yeah, but you can't read it." Yeah, but look at the pictures, for God's sake, they're so beautiful. And I was just a huge fan of his. And then I moved to Los Angeles from Chicago, and I'd heard that Mobius was working for Disney on Tron, and I knew a man who was he was working on Epcot Center, so he had kind of a big job. He was like head of one of the pavilions, And he was at Disney. I said, hey, there's this guy at Disney. If I could just meet this guy. It was so crazy. And he was very mysterious. Nobody knew very little about him in the United States. And he said, what's his name? And I gave him his name. And about 3 days later, he goes, well, we're going to have dinner with him on Saturday night. And I was like, and I still didn't believe it was actually going to be him. And we became friends. And I never told him what I did. He said, what do you do? I said, well, I can kind of draw. He goes, can I see some of it? And that's how it started. He liked what I did. But I was always too shy. I'm one of those guys. Look at my drawings. I say, I'm probably afraid of rejection as well. But we became friends, and I decided to move to Europe and see what it was like because I love French comics so much. And he introduced me to his publisher at the time, which was Metal Hurlant, which is the French version of heavy metal.
Yeah.
And my first thing I ever did was printed in the heavy Metal Hurlant. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. One thing I've always enjoyed about both your work and his work was the landscapes and this kind of almost transcendent kind of establishing shots, and just this feeling of it just evokes this kind of otherworldly, even if the settings look like somewhere in the Southwest, or it's just a different pace to just kind of reading a book, almost something spiritual.
He was somebody that, and I kind of learned from him, was just the idea of, if you draw something semi-realistically and you try to make it in perspective and such, if you put something weird in there, it looks even weirder. But if you put something weird in front of something weird, it's weird, but it's not as weird as if, like, you got a guy like Mobius would draw some, I don't know, like a little demon creature having a piece of cake in a coffee shop, and everybody else is absolutely realistic. It's like, what the hell's going on in that? Because it's just that one little thing that's out of place and something that everybody can identify with.
Yeah.
And I always thought that really makes for something even stranger.
Well, just earlier, I was looking at some of the latest issues of Shaolin. I think it was issue 5 or 6, where right in the background of a bigger scene, there's a pterodactyl swoops in, steals a baby, and it's like this whole other story that's going on just in this one little, postage stamp sized part of a larger panel. But then that's just happening constantly throughout.
The pterodactyl goes through, I think, 3 books. 2 books you can see him carried. I had this whole idea that they were like stealing babies, and but I have all these little backstories in my head that I know. I'm really pleased and surprised that you noticed that, because it's. I think the backgrounds in my comics are almost as important or more so than what's going on in the foreground, because I think of backgrounds as being like another character.
Well, there's so much commentary that's going on, between like there's the advertisement and the billboards, but then the graffiti, but then there's like the tattoos and the tattoo choices, and then it's just like goes on, and it's just like the layers of reference. It makes me wonder, are you pranking some of your friends or maybe some rivals?
A lot of it is a little of what's going on, I think, in the United States with just in general. I mean, the gun culture, and I'm not against guns, but I think there's certain guns nobody needs to have, and there's certain equipment nobody really needs to have. But I never want to do is like have somebody stop and say, talk about it. This is wrong, blah, blah, blah. I just kind of like, well, look at the pictures, and you don't have to see that if you don't want to. You don't have to.
I mean, it's almost like you ramp it up in such a way that it's like having your cake and eating it too, because you still have like the John Woo style gunplay going on, and that's just like, F yeah for anyone who's into that. You've got those frozen moments of just like, the gunfire. So quick little technical question. How closely are you working with your colorist to get some of that?
To be quite honest, because I worked with a few, but Dave Stewart, who does the color art, at the very beginning, he asked me, what do you like? And I sent him mostly Hiroshige and Kuniyoshi and wood block prints, ukiyo-e. I love that range of color, along with there was a Russian illustrator named Burlyman, who also, his stuff looks very much like ukiyo-e, very subdued colors. And I sent him this stuff. And I said, this is the range of color I like. And that was it. And he sent me back, and I go, yeah, that's it. I very seldom had to change anything. Every once in a while I go, yeah, could you put a little more splattered blood on his face? Like at some point, this one of his stories, he comes bursting out of this creature, and he's kind of clean. And I go, well, he's just burst out of this thing. He should have some junk on him. But other than that, he puts so much work into those things. And I've hardly ever, every once in a while, something like, well, you see this little thing, that's part of his shirt there. You've made it flesh colored, but that's actually part of his shirt. But if I have 5 or 6 little notes on an issue, I'm surprised, because I don't know how he is able to understand, especially in those very complicated overlapping figures. He can tell that that's part of a finger, that's part of a gun, or that's a cigarette butt, or just, he's just amazing.
Or just even like the flash of the gunfire,
Yeah.
So like that's brightly colored, but then the gun itself is still trapped with the black lines.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I do it with, it's a French, what they call ligne claire, which means clear line. That was something I picked up from, once again, because Mobius, when he did his Western, Lieutenant Blueberry, it's more heavy black shadows. Milton Knifish, if you would, if you're familiar, or Alex Toth maybe.
Yes.
But when he would do his kind of science fiction stuff, it was a ligne claire, clear line, which is a school that was sort of based somewhat on ukiyo-e, and it was also made popular by Hergé on Tintin. Tintin is the pinnacle of a line clear. It's all just, just a line. But you got to kind of, I mean, some of the, you can't hide a lot with that. You gotta, if you make a mistakes in line clear, it's pretty evident.
One thing I was going to ask you is, I feel like you have a very singular style, like we know when we're looking at one of your pieces of art, but you also have a lot of collaborations too. And I'm just curious if that was ever a challenge, navigating, having your methodology, your look, your distinctiveness, but also being able to collaborate with people like Frank Miller and other people, and kind of, what was it like navigating that aspect of things, or did it just come natural?
Well, I think you could probably ask them. I think for them it was probably very difficult, because I'm very insecure, and I would never show anybody anything until it was done, because I thought if I show it to them and they don't like it, or they make some kind of, I'm not going to be able to finish it because I'll feel like I did a bad job. So I was working with Frank, I think I'd do 10 or 15 pages before I'd show him anything. And I remember later he'd tell me that he was like, he changed the story because he said it wasn't the way he kind of expected it, or like I did this thing called Hard Boiled, and originally it was about this guy. He was like a cyborg. He had some mechanical parts, but I drew such crazy stuff. He said that there's no way a human being could survive, so he turned him into a robot. Wow. But I'd watch those. I discovered John Woo, and those John Woo films. For the first time I ever was in American films, if you get shot a certain way, the character's doomed. But in a John Woo film, unless you get a bullet right in the head, and then they're still standing at the end. I mean, at the end of, I think it was Better Tomorrow 2, they've all been shot to hell, and they go, oh, let's go home, let's go get a beer or something. I mean, I'm just like, and so I thought, well, I was very influenced by that. So, well, what the heck? I mean, who cares? It's just a comic book anyway. And but somebody, because Frank would be like, well, I don't know how you could survive something like that. I said, well, Frank, it's a comic book, who cares? I mean, if they're going to buy into, I was like, if you buy into Superman or Batman, I mean, I don't know why suddenly this would send up a red flag in terms of reality.
Yeah.
What do they call that? Valley of disbelief, or
suspension? Yeah, suspension.
Yeah. Even I heard Guillermo del Toro talk about it, and he said that if you write a book about a guy who can turn people into chocolate, either you buy it or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you're not into it, then you're not going to like it. But so if they're not into it on the first page, then chances are you're not going to convince them 20 pages into it. So
Yeah.
I mean, like comic books, things happen. They're just totally impossible. But that comes from after John Woo. I'd always watched martial arts films, but especially the Choi Hark films.
Great films.
When you had it's like, oh my God, I just would love that. Like, I think it's in one of the Swordsman, one was he produced where like Jet Li or someone's running across a field of wheat, and somebody just says, "Oh, he's grass walking," and they just said it kind of like, like, "Oh, he's taking a jog." And I love that they take for granted that people could do that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Hollywood, they've been like, well, I don't know, because when I worked in the Matrix, they thought all that stuff was goofy. Warner Brothers.
Really?
I remember them saying that they thought that the only guy that was really convincing in Kung Fu was Steven Seagal. Because they had tried to get Jet Li in
that would be great.
and they were like, no, because Seagal's he's the Kung Fu guy.
Oh.
Jesus Christ. Anyway.
Yeah. That, as a martial artist, that hurts. That's like when somebody's saying like, chow mein, fettuccine, it's all the same.
Yeah.
It's all
It's
like
it's yeah. But eventually, but the one interesting thing about that whole thing was that they had introduced, they'd showed the Wachowskis, they showed Warner Brothers, they had copies of these films, and they showed them. And Joel Silverman, who's not, he's whatever he is, but he's like, wow, he could see a gold mine when he saw it. And he got a hold of Jet Li, and he put him in some movies.
Yeah.
So and I met Jet Li, and I said, if you've done anything in Hollywood, you could probably say thank you to the Wachowskis, because they were the guys that showed you to these, because they're very close-minded there. Unless they react when it's become a hit somewhere else. They never want to be the first guy to like commit to a Jet Li or a Stephen Chow or so many other.
Yeah. I was watching an interview with you. I think it was on Kayfabe, and you were talking about your experience working on that, and it just seems like you didn't compromise, your work on that, or even just didn't fall into that trap of being kind of wowed by the whole Hollywood, hierarchy, or
Yeah, because I always wanted to draw comics, and when you're working in Hollywood, you gotta have to do. I admire those guys out there, because, one week they're working on Jurassic Park, the next week they're doing Stuart Little. I was like, how do you switch gears from that to that? Because there's so many things that I would say no to. I don't want to do that, because I would never take a job if I didn't think I could do it. Because even when they sent me I asked to see the script for The Matrix before I agreed to work on it, which I guess really annoyed Joel Silverman. Who the hell does this guy think he is? And it wasn't I thought he was anybody special. I just thought, if I can't draw this stuff, I'm not going to take their money, because it's better to say no than to do something and get a bad reputation. And I read it, and I thought, well, I really like it. I'm going to try and do it. I hope I can do it. And if I did it or not, but I did work on them. And it was, and I was as where I could watch all the stuff that was going on. I saw how the stars got treated. I saw how the guys that weren't stars get treated. And you see how, the Wachowskis were always really good with everybody. They treated everybody equally. But you see the studio people, they'd come in the office, and there were people they wouldn't talk to because they weren't their level. And the Wachowskis were never like that. And Keanu was like that too. He was just so wonderful with everybody, and very, very open. And it wasn't like, don't talk to Keanu. He hasn't had his coffee, or don't talk to Keanu. He's just had a cleanse, or whatever. It's just very open.
Well, Keanu Reeves is someone that's been very much, embraced by the Kung Fu community after the work he's put into like sticking with it right
Yeah,
after the Matrix, and sticking with Tai Chi, and then like now with the John Wick work,
yeah.
he's still kind of delivering on that level. But I was thinking about your mention of John Woo, and I see a lot of John Woo in the more recent pages from some of the gunplay scenes. I don't want to spoil too much of it for those who haven't had a chance to read it, but some of the let's call it the gun fu
Yeah.
scenes that you have in Shaolin Cowboy. But it got me thinking, like, I want to get a little nerdy about comics, and I don't know. I'm making the assumption that that it's not all just intuition for you, right? So I'm wondering, like, what you think, do you decide when you want to have scenes that are just like one frozen moment and all the details are happening, versus when you want to like break it down panel, like, okay, now I need to do a few panels to really show like a detail or an exchange.
Well, I don't, I don't know. I kind of I just kind of lay it out very loosely.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's going to be a gunfight, and then I'll start drawing it. And a lot of those things happen afterwards. Like, oh, what if this happens and this happens, and um, I can't
Right.
say it's I can't say it's what do you call it improvisation, because you can't with because you got to draw. But in some way, it kind of is. I mean, the story kind of changes. Well, what if this guy had this ability and that he didn't have at the very beginning? If that makes any sense. I don't.
So you kind of know that you're starting off at this
Yeah,
point and you want to get to this point,
that's about
but
as much as I
but
know
but
generally.
then along the way you're like, I really want to draw this one epic scene where I could just show him blowing up a whole room with his action or something.
Well, I mean, and this one a little more because I won't give it anyway, but he gets angry because of what these people have done, these hateful, supposedly upright people have done, and he goes in there, and I mean he's a murderer. He goes in there and he really just kills all those people, and they're despite the fact they have those guns and they're shooting back at him, but he instigates it. I mean, in theory, he would be arrested because he's like a mass murderer. But,
It's a righteous fury
yeah,
he's delivering.
but there's a lot of, I mean, there's so much collateral damage in the world these days. It seems like I draw that quite a bit. It's just like it seems like human life doesn't have so much value for many people.
Is it cathartic for you sometimes to just
Yeah,
draw these crazy scenes
yeah,
and just like
that
just
one was because I was so angry about stuff that was going around.
mhm.
And you say I go back to the whole. I often wonder if it had been misconstrued as I'm embracing that culture. The gun culture. I maybe it's hypocritical because I draw it, but I think it's really ridiculous. I mean, I just don't believe people have said it before need to have semi-automatic weapons. I mean, I don't know if it's because people watch Walking Dead too often and they think that well, eventually zombie apocalypse is going to come and I want to be prepared. I mean, even when I think of that you never hear about, or very rarely, of somebody in one of those situations where there's a mass shooting, someone pulls a gun out and drops him before something happens, except for that young man in Monterey Park that
Yeah.
rushed after. Holy shit, man!
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, if that guy, I don't know if they give a Congressional Medal of Honor for something, but if somebody deserves one for that, he does, because holy cow. I mean, that was something. And he didn't have a gun. And I'm not saying that, but wow, he saved a lot of lives.
Yeah.
But that's so rare. It was such a, it's kind of a, it was a horrible thing, but that was just so amazing, kind of uplifting to see, yeah, some guy, a guy no one would expect did the right thing.
You started out in animation, if I'm correct, to some degree. Did that inform the way that you do comic books, or do you kind of view, or just even the work ethic alone, or was that just a separate thing, or how did that affect you moving into the comic book
Well,
medium?
it did, because I watched all these Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and I always thought they were always kind of, some of them, the earlier ones, were really good, but the ones they were doing when I went to work there were pretty bad, I thought. and that anybody can get a job at this place. So they didn't even hire a schmuck like me. And when I got in there, there were so many great artists. And it's just a matter of money and time. And I learned that even though they might not look great, there's a certain ability to draw you have to have, which is to think in 3 dimension and think in perspective and think in action. And that helped me a lot, because my boss was like, he wanted to fire me every week because, oh, you didn't, did you go to school? I go, yeah. No, you didn't learn much. You got a lot to learn.
Wow.
Every day was horrible. I felt so horrible about myself, but it forced me to work at it. And I would watch these guys, because I mean, they had so many. They had Jack Kirby was there, and Carmen Infantino, and there was Alex Nino. They had brought in a lot of artists from the Philippines, and hardly any of it made it onto the screen. But them there, you'd see them drawing these layouts and such that, that sent to Taiwan, because they had it was called Cuckoo's Nest, I think they called it, was the animation company that Hanna-Barbera set up, and they did all the animation. And it was just, they had to turn it over so fast. It's just had so much money. But the preliminary stuff, the backgrounds, all that stuff were just really, really amazing. So that helped me a lot. That, and the whole idea that in animation, if you think you've pushed something to its farthest, you push it 1 beat more. And that's what I see, like in Chinese films and Japanese films. They do that a lot. America kind of has a tendency to kind of like back off, kind of like, yeah. It's like, I love it. So there's anything goes. I mean, you got a little bit more of that, I think, now in American films, because of the influence of all these cultures. But you just push it a little bit further.
Definitely. I think there was a certain charm in the Hong Kong action films in the early 90s, mid 90s, that I just feel like that magic just kind of dissipated. Like as soon as they started getting the CG and started trying to do things that way, I feel like it lost that charm. I mean, you could see the wires, you could see a lot of the fake stuff, but there was a charm to those movies. And my friends and I always talk about that you just can't recapture that period of
films, I mean, I still really, I mean, I think Stephen Chow, the Shaolin Soccer and also from here, just, I don't know, they just make me smile every time, because I just love the whole idea of, in his movies, it's all over the map in terms of, you just can't do in the US. It's got either it's dramatic or it's funny, and he would have both. And his stuff, he makes me.
I always think of his Kung Fu Hustle, and almost as though like there's a missing sequel out there. Like, it was so rich with so many characters, and the way the story just jumped forward, like there's almost another movie out there to be told, or another story. Like the way he says
he's got a sequel that he wants to do, but not with him in it. I mean, all of his movies, like that mermaid movie that he made, it's just so weird. It's funny and weird, and it's like that thing is all over the map, and you just can't do that in most films. It's like, no, what is it? It's neither fish nor fowl. And he doesn't seem to care, and it seems to work.
Yeah. One thing I always love about your action is it's like it just hits you. It hits me so strongly in so many ways. Like at one point it's so visceral and so violent, but there's almost, it crosses the border, to me at least a little bit, almost to like a slight bit of humor. And then there's this grace and this beauty to like I was looking at Shaolin Cowboy, and there was a sequence where he was, just massacring this group of people, and the blood was just like this line tracing the movement through the whole thing. And it was all those things at once. Is that something intentional? Is that something that you strive for, or is,
I'm pleased or touched that you noticed that. Yeah, I do. I think it's that stuff I draw is just really goofy, and I mean it's just so over the top. It's kind of, I think it's hard to take seriously. I mean, I've seen other things that people do, and it kind of makes me, because there seems to be some joy in it. I don't know, in which shouldn't be there. And yeah, I say that, but I mean, you know, I draw that stuff where, but it's just, to me, it's so goofy because my wife really does not like violent stuff. But she might be one, but she's just lying to me, but she finds that stuff that I draw, it doesn't bother her. It just seems so over the top. And I think a lot of that comes from, once again, from watching some of the John Woo stuff, because that stuff to me is so over the top. And Sam Raimi, his Evil Dead movies were just, I mean, because I hate that kind of stuff. I hate like Saw and all those kind of films. I can't watch that stuff because it's serious about that gore, and whereas Raimi is like, it's just, I mean, so goofy. You know, there's him just constantly being splattered with blood, and I mean, the guy that cuts his own hand off, and like, is like, then realizes he's like, oh, I win, and oh wait, I just cut my own hand off. That kind of crazy stuff. Just, but yeah, and I sometimes I try to use that, you know, the blood sometimes to kind of give motion and direction, and because I don't do too much like speed lines. I wish I could do those, like the manga stuff is Jesus, those lines that those guys do.
Yeah.
I saw there's a tutorial on there by this amazing artist named Urasawa. He has a show on YouTube called Man Ben. Now he has his own channel called Urasawa. And he talks about how when he started out, he spent a month learning just drawing those speed lines.
Wow.
And he showed how to do it. And it's just, wow, it's amazing. I mean, because it's just so precise, and I just don't have the patience or probably ability.
That's part of like the studio structure, right? Like that dude just does the speed lines.
Yeah, or the buildings, or the guy does the cars. And I visited a couple of those guys' offices, and it's just, I don't know how they do it, because it's even with those assistants. I mean, Mobius, he told me he tried to have an assistant once, and he just would end up redrawing everything. And I go, yeah, because even me, it's like, I worked on a film and I was giving people work to do, and I felt really bad about it. I go, well, I should do this, and well, it's not exactly what I want. And it's hard to give stuff to other people.
Do you think that in that sense, it's not necessarily a matter of control, but you kind of have to give some of that creative vision when you bring people, and even if they're supposed to be kind of a proxy of what you're doing, I would think, you know. And
when I work with, for instance, the color artist Dave Stewart, like I said, I've given him very little direction other than what the palette of color that I like. Because also when his, you know, it's like he's my partner, he's my partner in a way on this comic. I mean, it's as much his as it is mine because of all the work he does on it. He what's his vision of it is. I mean, he'll talk to me about, you know, he'll say, well, maybe if, you know, this, what do you think the color of this monster should be? Oh, it might be interesting if it would. But often I just let him, because I feel if people are invested in that way as well, they'll give a little bit more of that, as opposed to, oh, make the shoe blue and then make the hat red and make sure the pie he's eating is blueberry, not cherry. And I mean, I've seen comic strips like that where everything is, you know, there's a Jacqueline Suzanne paperback on the coffee table, and there's a glass of tea and a photo of Harlequin or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
make me crazy.
There's like a new generation of comic artists who seem to be very like focused on deconstruction in terms of like how it's done, and like rules and whys and like methods to get to the finished project. And I wonder if like more seasoned and more artists who have, you know, been doing the work longer have that more internalized, so it's not necessarily something that you could like create a formula for.
Yeah, I know, because I don't know if I have a formula. I know I was thinking, well, something Mobius said to me. He said, well, you know, I spent 40 years learning how to draw so I could forget about it. And I can see, because he'd watch him draw, and, you know, he could, you know, I'd see him have his bad days too, which is always very encouraging. It's like, oh, even he has a problem sometimes. But I know that because sometimes I'll listen to that cartoonist kayfabe and they'll start talking about guys that they're talking to Dave Gibbons. And he was talking about using this 9-panel grid. And I know Dave, and I go, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he goes, well, I could go on for hours talking about the grids. And if you hear other people go, it doesn't, I don't myself, I don't know. I just go, I think this panel should be like this. I like CinemaScope stuff. If I could draw a comic, I wish that every page was just like in CinemaScope because it gives you so much leeway for drawing.
Well, I've seen you do it a couple of times when you'll do like the CinemaScope across the top of a page, and then you'll like each page will be like a series of panels that like almost zooms in and focuses on a specific sequence of actions.
Yeah. You do the thing. You have the close up of the guy with the hand on the going for the gun, then you cut to the eyes, and you cut to the other guy's eyes. That's sort of Leone thing. Then you cut to the hand hitting the gun. Then you cut to you either go to a wide shot and have everybody getting shot, or you just keep it all in close up, depending on how fast you want it to go. Because when you do, I think when you're doing the small panels, it should be fast. It's going because they're small, so
well, it's like beautiful. Like, you also for the aficionados, you got a flying guillotine slipped in there as well, and
force that. I think I put that in there because when I heard that, I think I drew it before he died. That movie freaked me out, man. I couldn't watch it. It came. I saw the trailer and that weird music. It was like German techno music that they would play every time he would show up. And you knew somebody was going to lose their head. When it come on TV, I'd turn it because it bothered me. It's so funny because I had a real aversion to gore, and oddly enough, and those movies, maybe because it was so kind of fake looking, it kind of looked real because it was just that you hear that music and you'd throw that thing across the room and some guy would lose his head. I'm like, holy shit, man! It freaked me out. A lot of those, like I remember seeing the poster for Five Fingers of Death. I was young enough. I'm old enough to have been when that, the whole kung fu explosion hit the United States. And he's got the eyeballs on his fingers. And I go, I don't want to see that. I'd seen the Kurosawa stuff and I was really into that. But blood splatter. I had been freaked out by Bonnie and Clyde at an early age. The end of Bonnie and Clyde, if you've ever seen it, where it was before Sam Peckinpah, and they're just doing this kind of what Sam Raimi would call a chicken dance because they're getting hit by bullets and they're flying around, and that scared the heck out of me. And so anytime there's anything like that, I remember Billy Jack. I really like those Billy Jack movies, and in that second one or the third one, I don't know how they had this sound effect every time somebody would get hit by a bullet. They must have slapped a slab of meat because you hear kind of you never heard that in a movie before. Like the impact of the bullet hitting the flesh, and all these people are getting hit by these bullets, and I go, whoa, that was rough.
Yeah, it's funny what'll turn you. Like we're talking about gore. I can watch a gore movie. If there was a movie of somebody getting a paper cut and a close up of that, I couldn't watch it. Something about that is just too much for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I was noticing looking at the book was I really love the design of Shaolin Cowboy, the color scheme, the three primary colors, which just harkens back to all the classic heroes, Superman and what have you. I'm assuming that was an intentional decision.
Yeah, that was I picked those colors because I wanted it, one, because of Superman, red, yellow, and blue, and whenever I'd seen color images of the Monkey King, there was red and yellow and blue.
Yeah.
And so that was important to me. Yeah.
That's great. And just what I always enjoy so much about your work is like, even when there's the mob of goons, I can look at the design of any of the goons and I could see a series about that character, amidst the crowd. The detail, the silhouette, the care and the costuming,
I always think about the dialogue that they must be having when they're sitting around. Because if you go into a coffee shop or something, you sometimes just hear a dialogue that is just so or people walking down the street. I remember sitting on my front porch with young ladies walking down the street, and she's like talking about her, some infection and the pus that's coming out, and she's talking at the top of her voice, and it's just a little bit. Well, when the pus is coming out, I'm not going to. And then she's down the street, I'm like, holy shit, man. I remember when I was a kid growing up, I remember my parents would hear them talking, and they go, "Did you hear about Betty? Betty, she's pregnant." Like, and as a kid, I go, "What is pregnant? Wow, it must be something really bad," because they would whisper it. Now they're talking about, like, well, my uterus was removed, and they put it on a plate right in front of me, and I was like, what happened to that? And it's
Well, I mean, these days they'll be quick to just snap a photo and post it, right?
Yeah.
And I noticed that you were doing that quite a bit within some of the characters of the thing, where they're like trying to take selfies in the midst of their combat. And
because you see these things like where somebody's saving somebody and they're filming themselves saving somebody. I'm like, well, how, who has that, save them, forget about the fucking telephone.
Yeah,
it's amazing to me.
Or they're donating food to a homeless person or money, and they make sure they film themselves doing it. It's like, I think you're missing the, one thing I would be curious as an artist, but also just living where you live. Do you feel that as an artist, it kind of nourishes your creativity being there rather than being here? Like, I know the few times I was able to go to France or like to Paris or something like that, just the fact that you're in a different environment and that there's art in the architecture and everything around you. Do you feel as an artist that's important to your creativity, or do you feel that is that just something that's an aside? Or
well, I think it probably would be to most people, but myself, I'm so kind of crass. I think that I'm always sort of attracted by the more cynical nature where I look at things, and like for instance, just people filming. If one of their friends is getting sick, they're filming it. Like, oh, what are they going to do with that? Are you going to post that? And then that's the kind of stuff that I remember. I remember one time when I first moved here, I was living in Paris. It was 20 some years ago. People said, "Oh, take some pictures of Paris to send us and bring it back." And I just realized no matter where I went in Paris, there was always dog shit. People wouldn't clean up. So I have pictures of, like, they got the Eiffel Tower in the foreground. I got like this pile of dog shit. I'm at the Montmartre, and then I take a picture and they go, "What is it?" They go, "Oh, that was my kind of statement," because people wouldn't clean up after their dogs. I mean, they kind of do it now, but and then they turn the whole thing in. What I love about the French culture is, like, we got to do something about all this dog shit. We get some PR guy. We got to turn this around somehow. What if we said that if you stepped in dog shit, it maybe you're gonna have good luck the rest of the day? And there's like this thing now. If you step in dog, it's like, but it has to, I think it's your left foot that has to step in it. But it's like, what PR game? We've turned around. People aren't worried about dog shit anymore because they want to get some good luck. I got some good luck today, honey. Oh, did you step in dog shit? Yeah. Remember the phrase "merde"? Merde?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of time the phrase when you say good luck to someone in French, it's "merde, merde, merde." And I always wondered what that meant. Where did that come from? And it comes from when they would have a play in Paris. If it was a successful play, everyone would come, and they would come in their carriages with their horses. And if there's a lot of horse shit in front of the theater, that meant you had a success. So you'd wish everyone shit, which is so fucking crazy. The signal once again is like, let's turn this, this sow's ear into the silk purse.
That's brilliant.
Now the story behind "Merde."
Yeah, there you go.
I've only ever been to Paris once, and I was amazed at how ornate the crosswalk buttons were.
Yeah. Not that anybody pays attention to them. You really have to be careful now, because everybody's on. I'll see guys, jump onto the sidewalk on their motorcycles. I mean, really, because the traffic will be so bad. And you get a lot of people on these electric scooters, and they're going pretty fast. And I've seen them hit people, and it's a little out of control. But
that's rough. from you, like introspectively, like how do you feel? I mean, do you feel that your art's evolved a certain way? Can you articulate like, okay, well, when I first started out, had this mindset, and this is where I'm at now, or has it just been kind of a fluid process? Or
I've always tried to, because I've been very influenced by movies, and I always wanted to get a certain sense of scope and depth, like the scope that I would see in a John Ford film, or the sense of composition that you'd get from someone like Kurosawa or Ozu or Kenji Masumi, who did all the Zatoichi movies. And I always sort of like tried to figure out if I could get that into my compositions, which like overlapping things, so you get a sense of depth of foreground, middle ground, and background. And that was really hard. It's really hard to do, and it's also sometimes you'll draw something and you think, oh yeah, but if there was like a hand coming in front of it, it'd create all this kind of neat depth. But then I have to erase stuff I've drawn, and it's like, yeah, but I finally got that thing drawn, and I have to erase it out and put it in because it looks better. But so I've made an attempt to. That is something that's always interests me, is to get better compositions and just that's a sense of depth. I don't know if I've achieved it, but I keep trying.
It seems like, looking at some of the fight sequences of the more recent, chapters of Cruel to Be Kin, it seems, are you like, do you map out like the scenario? Like there's a sequence that takes place indoors, and are you like mapping it out and then drawing it, or do you just like have that in your head and just?
No, I do layouts, really loose layouts of, what the perspective and the composition will be, and I mean, I don't, draw out, like details and such. It's just like very geometric blocking. I guess within the films would say I block this shot. Mm-hmm. And as I'm drawing it, because I get bored, I go, what if there's like a crab crawling up the back of a chair, or there's a poster of, Jesus drinking a beer in the corner, and just things that I think are find amusing.
Because I mean, it always seems like it's in a space, like it's like you can step in there. Like if you could get into that comic, you can step in and look around. Everything seems to have a place, like it's a reality rather.
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of trying to do. I don't know if I succeed, but I like that idea of, it's of that. I find it's really fun because sometimes people, I'll look, I guess I'm vain enough, I'll look to see what a review of it is. And they always go, it's so crazy and wacky and its own sense of reality. And I go, I don't think it's that crazy and that much crazier or wackier than Superman or Daredevil or Spider-Man. I mean, that stuff is all really acceptable to people.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you think about the how Spider-Man would work with those webs, I don't know. I mean, you either buy it or you don't, but it's I don't know how those web things would work, that he could actually swing through the city like that. It doesn't matter because it's a comic, but that they buy. But then me, oh, he's got this talking lizard in it, and it's really crazy. Well, what? That's crazier than a guy that has the powers of a spider. It's all pretty goofy.
Definitely. Are you do you have any thoughts as far as adaptations of comics into film? Do you feel that it's something that's successful oftentimes, or it's varying degrees, or do you feel like we still haven't really seen a good adaptation?
I oddly enough, as much as others, I really don't follow much of the comic book adaptations. I'm trying to think of ones that I mean, I thought Logan was really good. That I'm not a big, I was never a big X-Men guy, but that one I thought was good. And the Christopher Nolan Batman, some of those things I really, really, really liked. And I mean, the looks of them. I mean, that first Batman, that I always thought they didn't have enough action, because they got him in that rubber suit. So the Michael Keaton ones, I think they look really good, but he used to kind of like do this one because he's got that rubber cowl
Yes, yeah,
thing.
neck brace.
You can't really look, and he just kind of does things like this. He doesn't really, and Christopher Nolan at least had him in action. But I look to those. I find that I find the kung fu movies, the martial arts movies, a lot more comic booky than than these supposed comic movies, except for Shang-Chi, which I thought was fine. I liked it most when it was set in a real world, when they got to that fantasy thing with the dragons and stuff, and I like that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like, I don't.
It went full kaiju. I was kind of surprised,
Yeah. Yeah, it was originally called Master of Kung Fu, and I was like looking forward to seeing a Marvel Kung Fu movie. And I got that for the first 20 minutes, and then it became something else, So
I mean, I think the best comic book movies out there are those John Wick pictures. I think those things are just. I mean, I think it was Lana Wachowski said that she hit her nail on the head. They're kind of like modern spaghetti westerns too. They're just, I mean, they're just unapologetic, and they're just, I mean, they're really brutal. I mean, but gosh, they're great. I really like an Indonesian director named Timo. I can't think of his last name. He's got these two films on Netflix. He had one called The Night Comes for Us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes. And the other one, Kill Shot or Headshot, is it? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Bullet to the head, is it?
No, it's something like Kill Shot or Headshot, but they're both on Netflix, and it's like, they're wow. I mean, especially that The Night Comes for Us. It's like, oh my God, there's some stuff in there that even had me screaming with the air conditioner, which I was like, oh, my wife turned around. I can't watch this. Even I was like, oh wow. Anytime anybody brings piano wire into a scene, I get nervous because it's not gonna end well.
Wasn't that?
I like that way better than Shang-Chi, because like you said, 20 minutes into it, suddenly it's like somebody saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but that. And then we got to put some of that stuff in there with some monsters, and only not as good. I mean,
it's kind of like, it's funny because you think the stakes would feel bigger with the big kaiju and all that, but they didn't feel as big as the actual visceral fight scene between just people on a bus.
Yeah.
I don't know why
there's a sense of danger to it and involvement, and there's more like that, but that's.
They did at least have the landlord from Kung Fu Hustle.
Yeah.
So
they did
it was nice to see he's got a nice new place to hang out in,
Yeah. It made me think. I remember when I was working on those Matrix movies, and we started up on the sequels, and we were in this building, and Wu Ping came in.
Wow.
And he just come from Hong Kong, and he wanted to show us this movie he had just worked on. And it was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but it was what they called the cinema version, which is he bought it at the airport in Hong Kong, and it's like a bootleg that someone went in with a camcorder and filmed it. Part of it was in the theater, because you can hear that kind of like that theater sound, and then some of it was like off a moviola, and I'm laughing because we're watching this movie, and and he's like, yeah. This is a movie I made. It's like, well, it's not in the greatest light to see that kind of version of it. And he was just kind of like thrilled, or it's so funny that the movie had only been out for like 3 days or something in Hong Kong. And they already had these bootlegs. And we're all sitting in this room watching this thing. And the sound would go from like, how are you doing, to how are you doing? And back again. And sometimes the angle the thing would go like this, because they're watching that movie, a bootleg with Wu Ping. That was pretty funny.
What was he like? Were you able to interact with him on a fairly regular?
Just a little bit. He was pretty busy, and he didn't speak any English. And because I had big fans, they brought him in. And I was really kind of embarrassed because I brought a couple DVDs to have him sign, and one was his film, and the second one was I hadn't seen, but it said Wu Ping on the cover. But it wasn't one of his movies. He goes, I didn't make this movie.
Oh, no.
Like, oh, and they're like, oh, Geof. Oh, I go, well, it says this guy, it has his name on the cover. So, but I'd go and I'd watch them do the, put the guys on the wires and stuff. And yeah, it was, he had his whole group of people and they were always betting on stuff. They would bet on who was going to like, oh, who's gonna hurt themselves today. And they would laugh like, oh, look at him, he hit his head on the beam. Jesus Christ.
That's the people doing the stunt coordinating or
yeah, his whole, he had his whole team there. There was I didn't realize he was there because he looks a lot like his brother. I would have loved to have gone up and talked to him. I don't know which Yun it is, but he's one that's in Taoist drunkard. He's always, sometimes I think he plays a woman sometimes in films. He has these buck teeth.
Yeah.
And I think that guy's great. He's really good. And he was part of the team doing this. They had a whole bunch of, because they had all these guys. They were filming this scene where he fights all these Agent Smiths in this courtyard, and they had built that in an airplane hangar. And so all these guys are on wires. You can see all these guys yanking these wires and pulling them up into the air, and they're flying around. And I said, geez, can I do that? And they go, yeah, okay. We're all going to shut down. We're going to wire up Geof Darrow and bring him up into the air. And it'll cost us I don't know what it costs him, $400,000, because that's it would have taken 2 hours to do. It was funny watching him and seeing all those guys.
I always like to ask people when we interview them, and because of your experience with martial arts actors in films, for you, what's one of the craziest or most outlandish things that you experienced or saw as far as a level of kung fu or ability in that? I would be curious what
well, just personally speaking, I worked on a video game with Jet Li, and I went to his house, and I asked him questions I had always wondered. I thought I had the answers to him, and I was right. I said, ask him about these kung fu sequences. And I always thought that they were big fans of Buster Keaton. And I said, when you guys are doing these scenes, I mean, you don't write this stuff out. I mean, do you like know it's going to be in a tea house, and you get there and you say, well, we can do this and that, and we can do this and that. He goes, yeah, that's generally how we would do it. They didn't it wasn't written into a script that, we could take the chopsticks and throw it and go in for one ear, come out the other, and hit the guy behind him. That's all stuff that they would come up with as they looked at what they had to work with. Yeah. But this guy that took me over there, because I was going to take some pictures of him to work on this game, had a bull mastiff. And those big dogs. But it's a beautiful, very gentle animal. But so he comes and he picks me up, and we go over there, and he's got this dog. I go, Jesus, you're taking your dog with you? He goes, yeah. I said, did you tell Jet Li you're bringing this dog? He goes, no. I go, that was me, and I was bringing a dog like that to somebody's house. I'd let him know. Yeah. I mean, they look like, it's like a pony with teeth.
Wow.
And so over there with Jet Li, he was, the whole time he was there, whenever that dog would come around, I'd see him his body language would change. And he would kind of like he was always ready to do something, because he was very uncomfortable around that dog.
Sure.
That to me was pretty cool to watch. And then I asked him to do some stuff. And I remember he threw a punch at me, and he stopped like right there. And I could feel. It didn't touch me, but I felt something there. Like, I don't know if it's chi or energy, whatever.
The chi projection.
But yeah, I mean, I felt it. Like you see those weird, you see somebody hits in their face, like, blah, 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 like that. I wasn't like that, but it was like that much of that. And it was just, he was so fast.
Wow.
And I always thought, I thought, well, I'd like you to do a pose. And I thought he would just, you just go like this, and you'd do a pose. But he would go through the whole movement to stop there.
Wow.
It was so every time. Like, well, can you give me the kick thing? And he would do the whole thing and then stop at that point. I was like, wow. That was very enlightening.
That's amazing. Was that the Rise to Honor game? Was that the
I don't know if it ever came out. It was, I don't know. I think it kind of fell apart. He was living in Monterey Park, because they had that whole migration of people leaving Hong Kong because they were afraid that, when it turned over to, this was like 1999 or 2000, 2001,
Yeah.
that they would, and he just had a baby. This beautiful house. Very, very, very nice guy. And they were going to have him in the Matrix sequels, but he wanted way too much money.
Yeah.
And I think they got what's his name? Colin Chow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was really nice.
Was it different? When you first were working on the first Matrix movie, was it different than coming back? Because when it first was about to come out, there was no expectation of what it was going to be. And then it comes out, skyrockets, and now you're coming back to it with this kind of new perspective. Did that change anything for you and Steve Skroce working, on the art and the concept art, or was it just kind of back to the plan like before? Or
yeah, just kind of back to the plan, because we had become very close with them, and I was just trying to draw what they wanted, and I'd ask them questions, and Steve, God, that guy, amazing artist. I think he storyboarded 70% of those pictures.
really?
It's just so sad that they've never printed all his boards, because he was doing, like, for every one page of storyboards that other people would do, he'd do like 10.
Really?
And they're really beautiful. And I did very little boarding on it. I boarded one sequence in the first one, the subway fight. I did work on that. And I did the first take on bullet time.
Really?
But generally I was doing the concept stuff. And every once in a while, I think in the second one, because the scene on the freeway where he's got Fishburne has a samurai sword. I wanted to draw that, and they let me draw that, but I drew it. I did like cutting the car, like the wheels off car. Just crazy stuff that would have cost a fortune. So none of that made it in the movie. But we just did it, and I was just really concerned that I wouldn't disappoint him, because they'd been so nice to me, and I just wanted to do as good a job as I could. And it was really interesting, because I got to see a movie from beginning to end. I'd go out and watch them film, and I went on the press junkets, and I saw all the pros and cons of movies.
Was there a particular image that you had worked on that you were you delivered and were always like, oh, I wish I had spent a little more time, but then when you see it, realize that surpasses what you initially hoped it would achieve?
Yeah, I never thought they'd use anything that I did, to be quite honest, because I thought they'd hire me and they'd turn it over to a professional, and he would turn it into something. And they had always said to me, they said, if this movie ever gets made, because it really almost never got made, and if it wasn't for Keanu, it never would have been made. He was the linchpin that got them the budget.
He was the one.
Yeah, exactly. Because there were a lot of guys. They talked to Leonardo DiCaprio, and at one point it was going to be David Duchovny as Neo.
Really?
Wow.
But they were going to make this X-Files movie, and it was going to go about the same time as the Matrix movie. And he said, "Well, I'm committed to but the talk was always, the thought at the time was that he was using the Matrix thing to force Fox to give him more money for the X-Files film." But Keanu was Johnny Depp couldn't wrap his head around the script, didn't understand it. Keanu did, and he wanted to do it, which is pretty astonishing, because he'd done that Johnny Mnemonic film, and that thing was a big disaster. That he would do another sort of a cyberpunk kind of a thing, but he, and then they, like I said, I never thought that they'd use any of my stuff. And they said, well, if this movie ever gets made, people will know what you did. And I remember going to the premiere, and I'm sitting there I'm on the same aisle with the Wachowskis. And the first thing that I drew, I saw it on the screen. And I was like, oh my God, they actually did what I drew.
Wow.
And I remember I kind of looked over at them, and they're already looking at me, and they're smiling. They're shaking. Like, yeah, see, told you. And wow, they actually did use that stuff that I did.
Wow.
It was very, I just felt so proud. It was an amazing experience.
That's excellent. That's amazing.
A lot of neat people. I mean, a lot of nice people in that picture. And it was a nice set because they were, like I say, they were very good to everybody. And everybody felt that they were contributing as opposed to, you know, just some. I mean, I've worked in other movies where it's just, you don't even talk to the director. You never get to see him. The production designer comes in, he takes your drawings and signs his name on them and gives them to the.
Yeah.
I never really cared about. I mean, they paid me money and I got to draw something neat.
Is there a project that you'd want to, like, you know, jump on if you heard rumor of it? You know,
George Miller, if he did George Miller, if he had him, and I talk because I'm friends with Choi Hark. I like to work with him because he's a he can really draw, that guy. He's drawn comics. He's a big comic book fan, and we talk back and forth. And, you know,
so would he be your preferred director for a Shaolin Cowboy movie?
Yeah, I like him. I mean, there's a lot, you know, there's just a lot of guys that, I mean, you know, it's just such a, you know, goofy thing. I don't think anybody would ever.
Oh, I don't know. I think a line would quickly form of directors who'd wanna
but
take a stab at it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the funny thing is, and we talk about this, is I worried about drawing this comic, and I can ask you this about this whole thing of a cultural appropriation, because I'm worried about, you know, I'm this goofy white guy from Iowa that, I mean, I really don't know that much about martial arts except what I've, you know, some books I've read and and it worried me that is someone going to come out and say, how come you're drawing this? You shouldn't be doing this. But, you know, I've talked to people, my Asian friends, I don't say it that way, but they all seem it's okay, but that worries me a bit. I just wondered you guys' take on that.
I don't think there's anything wrong. I mean, you're asking somebody who's I have a Japanese last name, and I became a kung fu instructor. You know, so you know, and you know the dilemma between those two groups.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is that it's all about intent. You know, which place if it's somebody that's there to capitalize on a culture and just kind of appropriate it just for their own things, but if it's somebody that genuinely loves it and is passionate about it, which is so evident in your work. I mean, you are not going to put that amount of work and passion to something if it doesn't mean anything to you. Then you're doing it justice, you know. And your ethnicity is completely irrelevant to the whole situation, you know, because you're dedicating your life to this thing, you know. I mean, you know, I can only imagine the amount of work that you put in, and it's just, you know, there should be no reservations or qualms about the fact that you're doing it. I think you're uplifting everything by doing it, and you can just see you care about it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I love this stuff.
I mean, it comes through in the work, right? Like, I think like the Shaolin Cowboy is like the comic creators comic, you know, it's like the people who really are into like the craft will look at it and want to see it, you know, and pour over it and look for that pterodactyl that's in the background, right? But then, you know, talking with you and to see that there's like the flying guillotine hat, you know, like the Billy Jack, like you're peppering your work with all of the signifiers that show that you've put the time in to know that stuff, right? And I mean, we know that kung fu means, right, hard work over a long period of time. So you've done it, and then you're showing it to the people who have eyes to see it, right? And there are people who are just gonna gloss over it, and then there are people who might like those folks who want to show up and test their kung fu in a kung fu school, right? They're gonna show up wanting a little bit of that to begin with. So those guys you have to ignore or you have to deal with, right? But in terms of like the work that you do, I mean, once a person looks past the initial, oh, this is too violent, and then they start seeing that there's the satire, and then they start seeing that there's all of those references, I mean, I think it just transcends. I think that's why has had the staying power. And that's why people who are into it, know it. Like instantly say, oh yeah, the Billy Jack reference or the Zautuichi reference, and so it's like it communicates the knowledge like in that underlayer.
Well, I think one of the neatest things that I learned is, because I grew up thinking kung fu it means martial arts, it means fighting, and this one when I found out that it's just about skill, it's about if you're a singer, you're a great singer, that's great kung fu.
Yeah.
And if I'm not misunderstanding it,
Mhm.
which
No,
I
you're-
think is really, really beautiful. Like if you're a great cook, that's why you see these like kung fu and cooks. It's like, well, what do those two things have to do with each other? But kung fu plumber. I mean, any of it. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's in a dedication and to craft and trying to do something as best you can. You can have good kung fu at kung fu, if that's better pronunciation.
Definitely. And it's all based on we're trapped in this vehicle, right? So whether you're drawing, whether you're doing martial arts, it's utilizing this and bringing those together. And like I can say, as somebody who wants to see more and more kung fu content all the time and all that, it's like the fact that you're dedicating so much time to bringing it with your amazing skill set is like, I'm happy because I feel like we need more people out there. Patrick and I talk about all the time, more people out there actually pushing that narrative, pushing that part of that culture. Because as a Sifu, it's really hard to get people excited about Kung Fu nowadays. They would rather do more modern martial arts or things like that. So the more people we have like you in our corner showing how amazing it is, the better.
Can I ask you something? Because was it hard? The first time someone called you a shifu, how did that feel? I mean, was it kind of hard? Was it not just a silly question? Was it hard to accept or?
I guess it's almost like, Sifu, the word is composed of teacher, father, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like once you have your flock, but so I don't know so much when somebody called me it, but I still remember the first time I went to a Kung Fu event with my students, right? I'm 45 now. I started being a Sifu when I was like in my early 20s. And we went to this event and I was used to being the follower, not the leader.
Yeah.
And we all got out of the car and we're going to go to this event and nobody's moving. And I'm waiting for somebody to walk ahead of me to get to the event. And all my students are standing behind me and they said, oh, I'm the leader now. So it was kind of like Bambi trying to walk on the ice. I kind of like took one step forward and another and they followed. And then, but you just kind of learn that's a role, right? It's my role is that. That's not necessarily who I am. That's just who I am in the context of these people. So, yeah. But you, sir, are a Sifu. I mean, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that.
Well, just like what we were saying, right? You could have good kung fu in music or tea, and you have good comics fu. I mean, if we had a plaque, we'd be like putting it out right there,
Definitely.
Did you guys watch? Because I watch these things because I know you probably because they're so crazy to me. Or those the Chinese TV shows, the adaptations of the Louis Cha novels. Those things are so crazy.
Oh, what's so funny about that? My Sifu, who's a really old school, well-respected Sifu, very serious. I would try and talk to him about Kung Fu movies all the time. And he would go, why are you watching that junk? Just practice, it's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So one time I visit him and we're eating lunch, we're eating dim sum, and he starts talking about a Louis Cha TV show. I've never seen him this way. His eyes are ablaze. He's excited. And he's talking about it because it's the ideal of all ideal Kung Fu. It's the chivalry.
Yeah.
And even though it's exaggerated, those internal concepts of funneling the chi and doing this are actually what everybody's trying to do. And he's never done this before. He stops us eating lunch and he says, look, I got to go home now and finish this up because I'm on disc number 7 and I got to get to number 8, but I'm really glad you came to visit. And so after that, I said, he's never like this. I have to look at these. It was the Heaven Sword Dragon Saber.
There you go. Which one?
Oh my gosh.
There's so many versions of it. I think there's a new one just came out 2 years ago. And there's a movie that came out, I think, the last year.
Oh yeah. So at the time, the only translated one I could find was the 80s one with Tony Leung. And it was
really?
And it was like part Dark Shadows TV series, because it was so low budget. And it's hilarious. They're supposed to be on a mountain, but you can tell that they're on a soundstage, and there's a painted backdrop. And as they're supposed to be walking up the mountain, you can hear a cargo truck in the background reversing in the background. But the acting was so good, and the story is so excellent.
Yeah.
You forget
Those
they're great.
is it Jin Yong? Is that his name?
Yeah, Jin Yong, Louis Cha, Jin Yong.
Those
Yeah.
books are fantastic. But I've watched, the Condor Heroes, Return of the Condor's Hero, then the Heaven, which is the third one in the trilogy. But there's stuff in those like, oh my God, like especially in Return of the Condor's Heroes, where he's taught kung fu by a condor.
Yeah.
It's feeding him like adder bladders or some viper bladders that gives him, or eats a scorpion that gives him, or something. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, because some of them I think are done in mainland China, if they don't like just take the soldiers and go, look, you're going to be in a movie this week. There's like 500 extras in these armies.
Yeah.
And even the wire work is just like, how are they doing that? Because they're floating over, trees and shit. And it's and I can imagine that they don't have the same kind of safety stuff they have in the United States. I can't imagine somebody doesn't get hurt filming those things.
Yeah,
no, the stories are fantastic.
Oh, they're so great. I mean, they're addictive. I mean, you just want, and some of those moves are as you delve deeper into Kung Fu, there's some pretty out there stuff. I don't know if we can even put this on if I can tell you this, but I don't know if we can put this on the air because it's so outlandish. But I had heard you see this move a lot in Kung Fu, the Q Sao, the bridge hand. And I don't never told Patrick this, but this is a famous move. And my teacher told me about an incident with my grandmaster where they were in Hong Kong, and they got up in the morning, they went to go get some food, and there was a guy in a street stall, and he was being harassed by guys who were trying to extort money from him. And he hadn't even opened the stall yet, right? And so my grandmaster got really pissed off and went over to him and started chewing him out and said, you guys, how dare you? He hasn't even earned $1 and you're trying to get money out of them. So my teacher said, yeah, one of them threw a punch or a knife. He had a knife, you couldn't tell. But when he dove at my teacher, my grandmaster blocked with this. Mm-hmm. And he shot the guy about 10 feet back, and the guy just slid across the street. And then they ran away. So I bookmark that, and we always say in Kung Fu, the older generation had it, the current generation, it's a bygone era. And I put that away. So about 5 years ago, I'm at my studio with my students, and I'm talking about this maneuver. And I'm explaining how you can apply it very softly, like to move it, or you can do it hard. And they don't understand. There's only 5 of us in the studio. I tell one of my students, okay, punch me. I'm going to explain to you how you do it hard. And as he's punching and the punch is coming at me, I throw it up and I connect with him. And there's this noise. It sounds like a wet towel slapping on concrete. And I'm kind of confused because I've never heard that sound. I notice his eyes get really big. And then for some reason, his bangs start going forwards like this. And I said, what's going on? God. And then I realize he's starting to levitate. His feet are about this far off the ground. And he's going backwards in the air. And we have a glass window front, and he's going right towards the glass window. So as he's flying back there, I have the wherewithal that I reach up, I grab his wrist, and I yank him back down to the ground so he doesn't fly through it.
Wow.
All of us are completely weirded out. We can't believe what happened. None of us talk. I don't talk. My students don't talk. We just go back to doing our own thing. The next day, I finally work up the courage. I say, did what I think happened? And they go, yeah, Sifu. They said, so I asked him, I said, what did you feel? He said, I felt your arm connect. He goes, and then I felt the vibration, and it traveled through my arm into my chest. I felt my stance uproot, and I felt myself fly through the air. So first of all, I go, wow, that's amazing. I got to be there for it, And second of all, I go, well, my grandmaster put somebody 10 feet away. If I had just let him go through the window, we could have measured it, right? And seen if I matched up. So then I go back to San Francisco Chinatown to my teacher, and I go, okay, I'm like a kid. He's like my dad. I want him to be proud of me. So I get my Chinese classmate to translate everything in detail, and we're eating lunch. And I'm waiting for him to do what I've always wanted him to do, to pat me on the shoulder and go, yes, you are the chosen one foretold of in the prophecy. But instead he looks at me and he goes, yeah, it happens. He goes, it happens sometimes. He goes, what happened is your force and his force, when you connected with him, you absorbed some of his momentum or his force, and you pushed it back at him. And he goes, the timing has to be perfect. Now, our acquaintance Gene Ching, I talked to him about this because I was writing an article once. He says, don't put it out there because then there's the burden of proof, you know, and it's not something you can just replicate, and it's not something you can talk about freely. It's just a moment in time that as a martial artist, you get to experience, and it's not even me that do it. I just got to be there to witness it and happen to be there. But there is that real stuff out there. It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah.
That's how a man can pull a truck with his Johnson.
That's the quote of the night.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
No. I think you nailed it. but this is just an absolute pleasure. You know, it's like
me too.
Oh, really? I mean,
it's a great honor. And can I ask you it's silly? Excuse me, I don't mean insulting. What do you teach? What school of my daughter does Eagle Claw.
So I do Hongga, which is the style from Wong Fei Hong. So the reason I got into it was because of Jet Li movies, and I found out that the real Wong Fei Hong did this style, and I started learning it, and I thought I would be doing the no shadow kick like Jet Li.
Yeah.
And I found out that Jet Li does wushu, which is the acrobatic art, and the style I do is all about being low to the ground and throwing punches, and not nearly as flashy as Jet Li, but it's Wong Fei Hong style. So yeah.
He told this story when he was doing those movies. They didn't get paid very much. They're under contract, and the extras would get paid more.
What?
And so sometimes he would do an extra to make extra money. They put like a beard on him, and his own movie that he was the star of. And he told this story once that they're doing this scene, this scene in the water, and it's really cold. And they're doing the fight, and he comes out of it. And he feels funny, and he reaches down, and his penis has disappeared because the water was so cold and it shrunk up inside. And he goes, "Oh my God!" And then I think it goes, "Run! You gotta run! And he runs, and he goes, "Run! To heat his body up." And eventually they came back down.
That's amazing. That is a story for the ages, you know.
He was going to he thought he had done all he could in movies, and he was just kind of fed up, and he was gonna go into a Shaolin monastery. He was just gonna give it up and go in, and he goes to the monastery, and the abbot comes out and he says, "Go home. You're not ready yet. Things are going to happen." He goes home, he gets a call, and it's Joel Silver. And
wow, that's amazing.
Was that Kiss of the Dragon that he got called for?
Which Romeo's bleeding or whatever.
Oh, Romeo must die.
Horrible, you know.
When I was in Hong Kong, I got to ask my grandmaster about the real Wong Fei Hong. Because if you remember the Wong Fei Hong movies, Lam Sai Wing, the Fat Butcher, his nephew's my grandmaster. So
wow,
yeah. So we would go back and we talk to my grandmaster, and he would tell us a couple stories about the real Wong Fei Hong. Was Wong Fei Hong's family were all in the business of kung fu, right? The grandfather, the father who was in Iron Monkey, right, that Donnie Yen played, and then Wong Fei Hong. But after that, it stopped, and Wong Fei Hong's youngest son didn't want to learn kung fu. So he told him in front of all the students, he says, "If you don't practice more, I'm going to beat you up in front of everybody." So he didn't. So Wong Fei Hong beat up his son in front of all the students. And as he walked away upset, all the students went over to Wong Fei Hong's son and said, "Why did you do that? If you just practiced, your dad wouldn't beat you." And he said, "No, you're stupid." He goes, "I only had to get beat up once. You have to practice kung fu your whole life."
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And the other story that was really fascinating was about Wong Fei Hong and Lam Sai Wing, the butcher. And so I guess one time Wong Fei Hong had to go out of town, and he asked Lam Sai Wing for money. He needed money for his trip. So he went to all the students, "Please give me money. I need to get out of town." So he went to Lam Sai Wing, and Lam Sai Wing said, "Sifu, I'm a butcher. I don't have the money to give you." And he had a gold necklace. And he said, "Well, what about that gold necklace around your neck?" And so Lam Sai Wing said, "Oh, Sifu, I can't give this to you. This is like a family heirloom." So Wong Fei Hong says, "Okay, fine." And then Lam Sai Wing thought about it. He goes, "Oh, I feel so bad. He's my Sifu. He's done." So he gives him his gold necklace. "Sifu, take the gold necklace, use it as you will." And so Wang Fei Hong said, okay, you have heart. He says, Yao Sam, you have heart. You're a good guy. He goes, now I'll teach you my 9 favorite punches, the 9 unique fists of Hong Ga. So that's the only 2 stories that I got about the real Wang Fei.
And what happened to Wong Fei? How does he end?
He got sick. So he had a tragic life towards the end. He had several wives. I think the first 2 died. The last one survived. And then he died of old age. His wife became a sifu. And his wife was a sifu in her own right, of another style called Mokka. And she was much younger than him. And he met her when he was elderly. He was doing a kung fu performance, and he kicked his shoe accidentally out into the crowd, and it hit her in the face. And so she went up to him and slapped him in the face and chewed him out and said, like, you're a kung fu master, you should know better. And instead of him being upset, he kind of was like, oh, I like this young girl, she's got fire, right? So he started courting her, and she became his last wife. And after he died, she continued teaching, and my sifu saw her do a demonstration in the 1950s. And this, I've been wanting to get this weapon for years. She brought out Wang Fei Hong's staff, this special staff. And the staff was pliable like rubber, but really hard. And what it is the banyan tree. So what you do is a specialist type of staff. What you do is you go to a banyan tree, you go to the vine, and you cut the bottom of the vine, because it's going to go to the earth. You get a jar of linseed oil, and you let the vine soak up the linseed oil so it goes inside the vine. And then you cut the top of the vine off, and you kind of polish it in the linseed oil, and that makes it very hard and very pliable. And she brought out this staff at an event in Hong Kong and showed it, and my sifu was saying, yeah, it actually was like bending like rubber. So that, yeah, it just it just gets more and more fascinating when you find out these stories, So but so if I see a banyan tree staff in Shaolin Cowboy, I hope one of the people that gets killed in the background, I hope it looks like me. I want to be one of the
It's all because I did this thing with this chainsaw, and it's on the staff with each end of the chainsaw,
double tiger chainsaw.
Like, what's the goofiest thing I could think of, and that was one of them. But it was hard to run because it's so long that I kept thinking, well, everything I do, everything in CinemaScope, because I have room for him to be able to spin that thing around. But those I was thinking that in terms of drawings, like, well, the nunchucks are easier because you don't need as much, in my head, as much space to draw them. But if I worked that out, I could figure it out, because it just. But I don't know. Like swords and stuff seem so much easier than. But the staff is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's called in Kung Fu they say it's the first and the last weapon is the staff. It's the lowest level weapon you learn is the staff, and then there's usually a higher end version at the end, which is more complex.
I have and I've never watched it because it's all in Chinese, but it's Wu Ping did one of those TV shows, and it's a Wang Fei Hung show.
Oh wow!
And I don't think it's ever been translated, because he did that in between. He had finished The Matrix, and he went and he did that show. Wow. And I think it's with Vincent Zhao, who played him in like a couple movies before Jet Li came back, 1 or 2.
And 4, I think he was in like 4 and 5. I think. Yeah. When I went to Hong Kong to meet my grandmaster, it was like the best moment. I was training in his school in Hong Kong in this tiny place, and that TV show was playing on the TV, and I was training, and the theme song came on. And it's like a tear falls from the eye. It's like, oh, this is the dream.
Exactly why I wanted to have this conversation together, because I knew we could go deeper than the typical, what have you got in store for issue 6, right? We wanted to get into the deep stuff.
Yeah. But seriously, I've been a fan of your work for, I used to work in comic books as a teenager, and I've been a fan of your work forever. And so it is like it's just an absolute treat. When Patrick said he was going to help coordinate this, it was like it's a dream come true.
Yeah, because Patrick, you had written me, but I don't work with David Hyde. I didn't ask because and I thought, well, I don't know, because we had talked already. I didn't know what we were going to talk about, but then when the person from Clara from Dark Horse explained, oh yeah, that'd be fun. I really wanted to meet you. And
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it was also right around the time that you were doing some traveling, right? There was a few French festivals.
I went to Japan for a few weeks, and yeah.
So I mean, I was reaching out to you, as a buddy, but then I was also like, this is kind of a good enough thing that let me try and make it happen through channels.
You got another book coming out? You're working on another one?
Me personally, I have volume 2 in the works right now.
Cool.
It's going to be 100 pages rather than the 69. Wow. So I'm going for it. And Curtis also Curtis also has a comic.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually I have it here.
He sent me an ARC too. Look at that. Boom.
Yeah, it's my advance code. Good job, Patrick. Yeah, so
where can I find it?
I can mail you an advance copy if you're ever so inclined. I'd be happy.
I'd love to have one. Yeah,
that would be an absolute privilege. Yeah, it's all the kung fu stuff that I know and techniques and all that kind of stuff, and I enjoy it.
Now, we've been doing a full court press to really let people know that there's kung fu and comics is more than just the fight scene, right? Like even though the fight scenes are awesome. So that's why my comic is kind of aimed for younger readers to get those white belts to start understanding, the whys behind it. And then Curtis is just tackling it for here's the comic, here's the action, but then here's the legit kung fu behind it that he's allowed to tell, because the stuff he's not allowed to tell. Well, your daughter's making a name for herself in the arts too. She's kind of she works out on we moved here to be closer to her, and then she got a job at the studio that does you ever seen Futurama?
Yeah,
love it. Repeat. I have a Bender head right up there on my bookshelf.
She does character design on that show. They're bringing it back. She's been working on it. She worked on this other Matt Groening thing called Disenchantment.
Yes. Lots. The Miss, I tell you, Geof, the Miss is going to be thrilled at news of more Futurama. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think it's going to be on Netflix is what it's going to be.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so she's But I would go to tournaments with her. It was really interesting because most of the tournaments that they would have, everyone was, except for the kids from Brazil. It was like a football game. They'd be blowing whistles and music and this and that. I go, wait a minute, this is going to be a little more. It's going to show a little more respect, but it was a different thing. But they were it was a whole different vibe with them. They're really good. They're really very good. But it was more like an American football game to them. I'm a little, maybe I'm just corny, but I think a little more.
Well, I mean, tournaments in the US aspire to have that level of energy,
Definitely. But yeah, I've seen Brazilian competitors, and it's like a soccer game. I mean, they are so passionate and loud.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're shouting Portuguese while the person's in the middle of the
film.
Yeah, it threw me off the first time, but I actually appreciate. They're just so passionate. You kind of
exactly. It was I was shocked by it at first too, because everything was always just so respectful and.
Yeah.
I remember at Hanna-Barbera, there was this guy that had studied martial arts in the Philippines. He was a really goofy character, and I was really interested in martial arts, and so I'd say, "Yeah, you learned this and you learned this," and supposedly he learned it from some tribe in the Philippines and this and that. And he's going. And he started talking about it. He goes about using martial arts. He goes, well, why did you learn it? He goes, because it's great for busting heads. And I said to him, well, his name was Tim. I said, well, Tim, I thought the whole object of it was to have it and not have to use it and not to hurt people. He goes, oh yeah, that too. He said, okay. So he goes, oh, so I said one time, I said, so show me what would you know how to defend yourself against someone with a sword? Goes, oh yeah. I said, really? Yeah. He goes, pick up that stick. I pick up the stick. He goes, now you just try and hit me with that stick and you'll see what happens. I go, so I swing the stick at him, and I just miss hitting him in the eye with this stick.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, Sean, I felt so bad. Oh my God. He goes, I wasn't ready. I said, well, you told me to hit you with the stick. And so I did it. But, I was like, well, I guess maybe you couldn't do much against the sword after all. He was quite an odd character. You're probably the last guy that probably should know any martial arts because he would get into fights and hurt people. He was pretty crazy. But
that's funny.
Mobius did that once. He got stopped by the cops. He got stopped by some guys. And he just started doing these like poses that they didn't see in a kung fu movie, and it scared the people off. They thought he knew what he was doing.
I heard he did Tai Chi. I heard that he did Tai Chi for a while.
A little bit, yeah.
Wow.
He was quite a character.
I saw a drawing of somebody doing Tai Chi that he did just once, and when I was in Paris, I got some obscure art book of his. And it was beautiful to see a Tai Chi. I mean, it was just like, oh, yeah. But that's amazing stuff. But
well, I should kept you guys up too late.
Yeah. This was just an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you so much for taking the time and the interest and your very kind words. And hope we can stay in contact.
Definitely. I'll let since Patrick's in contact with you, when and if you'd like, I'd be happy to send this to you. And
I'll give. I don't know. Do you have my address, Patrick?
I do have. If it hasn't changed,
if I can get his information, I can just send it to him directly. If you send me your email or whatever.
Yeah, I'll put us all together in one email, and Geof, I have to thank you profusely for just taking the time out. And just being a part of it. It takes so long to respond things. I always think, I gotta write a nice letter. I'll finish this and I'll do it. And then it's the next day. Well, I'll finish this and then. No, I mean, you're doing such good work. So that's the part that's like, keeps us all motivated,
Definitely. Well, we'll definitely be in touch, and we look forward to what comes next.
Thank you so much, Shifu.
Yeah, thank you, Geof. Take care. Have a good one.
Have a great day, Geof. We'll be in touch.
Too. Get some good sleep tonight.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Bye.
We've got an early call. Bye. Take care.
See ya. Okay, that was amazing, wasn't it, Patrick?
Can you imagine how much fun it would be to hang out at a cafe in Europe?
Oh my gosh, totally.
Just drinking espressos and talking anything really with him.
Totally. And so humble. I mean, so humble, so generous, so nice. I'll be honest, I was a little intimidated, but he just completely made me feel right at home, and just what a giving person, what a talented artist and amazing person. So thank you so much to him. Thank you to Dark Horse Comics for helping us secure this.
Special shout out to the team at Dark Horse who really helped bridge that gap and bring us all together. So
thank you so much. So definitely. So that kind of winds the show down. Just quick updates. Shadow Ghost and Tiger's Tail still on Kickstarter for a few more days. We're in that final stretch. So please do consider making a pledge and checking us out. You can just go do a search for the word Shadow Ghost on Kickstarter. You'll find my campaign. Feel free to make a pledge. Feel free to share both if you can. That would be great. But we really appreciate your support. And Patrick, if you want to just kind of give people a little information about where they can find Tiger's Tail and how you're going to wind down the campaign.
Definitely. So Tiger's Tail concludes its campaign Tuesday, February 21st. I had to check that. Can you believe it? Tuesday, February 21st.
Yes.
9 p.m.
So please check us out. And without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and call it a night. And we'll finish with our end credits. Does that sound good to you, Patrick?
That sounds perfect. Thanks again to everyone who's been a part of this crazy journey. We hope you've enjoyed what we've been putting out there. And we hope you come back for more.
Definitely. We'll see you folks soon. Thank you.
I'm Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator, and the art director for Kung Fu Magazine for more than 20 years. But I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really special to me. It's the middle grade graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale. Imagine the story of tigers and dragons and martial artists and monsters. So when I launched the campaign for A Tiger's Tale Volume 1, I did not know what to expect, but it succeeded thanks to a group of passionate backers. It was also awarded the Make More Comics art grant that year and was later featured as part of an art gallery exhibit. And that's why I'm coming to Kickstarter, to cover production fees, printing, copy editing, things like that. Books completed, with the exception of a few pages I've set aside for color over the course of the campaign. This turned out to be a popular feature of Volume 1's campaign, so I thought I'd bring it back for Volume 2. I think it's going to be great fun for everyone. Hope you'll support the campaign. I'm very excited about it. Thanks for stopping by.
As a kid, I loved Kung Fu movies. So I went to Chinatown, trained with a wise teacher, and became a Kung Fu master. Sounds simple, right? Not really. My journey, like the study of Kung Fu, was as arduous as it was rewarding, filled with as many secrets as revelations and as much heartache as triumph. It's a defining moment in my life, and while I began studying Kung Fu to learn how to fight, what I discovered was a way to live. Martial arts never came easy to me. I was far from talented, and even farther from being the chosen one. It was only through years of tenacious perseverance that I was able to make steady progress. And so, I was surprised when my master told me that I should teach Kung Fu and share the art outside of Chinatown. I did just that and taught Kung Fu to my own students for 20 years. I always wanted to do more to share the art of Kung Fu with others, but was limited by only being able to teach those within my immediate area. What about the rest of the world? Then one day, I had one of the deepest insights about Kung Fu. I realized that the punches, kicks, throws, and myriad of martial maneuvers are merely the delivery system for the true essence of Kung Fu, the philosophy and way of life. Having worked for years as a professional artist and storyteller in film, animation, video games, and comic books, I realized that I could draw upon this unique skill set to share my passion for Kung Fu with the greater world. And so I created Shadow Ghost, a Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. The first issue is created entirely by myself, from story and art to colors and lettering. Every panel is filled with unprecedented accuracy in its depiction of Kung Fu by a comic book creator who knows from first-hand experience what it means to be a Kung Fu master. Shadow Ghost is a martial arts coming-of-age story about a young man whose search for the truth about a legendary hero leads him to study Kung Fu, and through a twist of fate, becomes part of the legend himself. For the first time in comic book history, you can immerse yourself further in each issue with Kung Fu skills technology, powered by Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Scan the QR code at the back of the comic and follow an exclusive link to an online instructional video where I teach you Kung Fu techniques featured in this series. With Kung Fu skills technology, you can do more than just read about the Shadow Ghost saga. You can become a part of it. The first issue is completely finished and ready for print. All that's needed is for you to make a pledge of support so that we can fund the printing of the first issue. Together, we can share the wisdom of Kung Fu with the greater world. Shadow Ghost is the story of Kung Fu. It's about the people, the art, the culture, and the philosophy. It's my story and the story of those that I've learned from, taught, fought, and loved. Join me and become part of the vibrant legacy in a place and time where we might not be the chosen one, but where we can make a choice to be part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves. I'm Sifu Curtis Fujita, and this is Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.